Теперь следующий доклад у нас будет о взгляде сообщества на ситуацию в регионе и на прогресс в области ВИЧ, туберкулеза и гепатитов в Казахстане от имени негосударственного сектора. И я очень рад приветствовать Оксану Ибрагимову, который член Казахского союза людей, живущих в ВИЧ, и будет к нам обращаться. Спасибо, Оксана, большое.
Спасибо большое за предоставленное слово. У меня нет презентации, я хотела бы немножко поговорить, расширить дискуссию, почему у нас эпидемия уже более 30 лет, она растет, ответ на эпидемию низкий. И сколько бы мы ни делали, сколько бы мы сообща бы не пытались сделать, все-таки мы не успеваем за тем паровозом, как говорится, чтобы сделать все идеально. Но в первую очередь, чтобы все ключевые группы населения были охвачены услугами, доступом к тестированию, и чтобы все услуги, которые предоставлялись, чтобы они соответствовали потребностям сообщества. Это очень важно. Ну, в первую очередь, хотела бы затронуть момент по доступу к лечению, что у нас много сделано. Я знаю, что миллионы тестируются, но не всегда мы успеваем за ходом то, что нужно вводить слюновые тесты, допустим, околодесневые тесты, они гораздо удобнее, они доступнее. Это не надо человеку идти в медицинский сервис. И многие вещи мы идем с таким вот, вроде бы уже все доказано, уже вроде бы все сделано. Но пока у нас это все внедрится, пока люди, принимающие решения, поймут, что это научно и эффективно доказано, мы, к сожалению, теряем по этому поводу людей. Также тема заместительной терапии. Многие знают, что никак она у нас в Казахстане, никак она у нас с пилотного проекта не расширится, не внедрится. И каждый год мы бьемся, чтобы эта программа имела место быть. И вот это, наверное, есть те моменты, когда сообщество вроде бы и пытается в ногу идти, но не всегда у нас это получается. Очень хочется сейчас, наверное, обратиться и к научному сообществу, чтобы также нас вовлекали во все исследования. В первую очередь я вам хочу сказать, что мы уже тоже стали экспертами, что мы не только можем оказывать сервисы, что мы можем также принимать активную роль и в доступе к людям, и также анализировать, потому что мы знаем, это наши жизни, это наш путь, и мы с эмпатией относимся к людям и всегда их поддерживаем. Поэтому очень хочется, чтобы научное сообщество тоже обратило на нас внимание и привлекало нас как экспертов именно в исследования, во все эти моменты. И самое главное, конечно, это когда та доказательная база, когда мы пытаемся ее внедрить. И очень хочется, чтобы также нас и вовлекали, чтобы люди, принимающие решения, услышали нас. То, что это важно, то, что это может остановить эпидемию, то, что нам виднее. Когда программы вводятся, те же программы снижения вреда, мы сейчас понимаем, что у нас новые вызовы, что у нас новые психоактивные вещества, наркополитика поменялась. И также очень хочется, чтобы наше государство, наше правительство понимало, что немножечко надо действовать решительнее, чтобы это все победить. И нужно уже внедрять это все, не просто а нужно это уже активизироваться, чтобы мы смогли с достоинством, чтобы мы могли эту эпидемию встретить в 2030 году, победить ее. Все.
Спасибо большое, Оксана. И на самом деле выступление Оксаны, она подтверждает, что пациентское сообщество оно заинтересовано в ускорении тех мер, которые государство должно предоставлять на вопросы, которые уже по требованию времени должны внедряться быстро, качественно. И вопросы именно качество предоставляемых услуг для пациентских сообществ и роль пациентских сообществ. И в том числе большую роль в этом вопросе играет Казахстанский союз лиц, живущих с ВИЧ, который, безусловно, выявляя эти проблемы, помогает нам научному центру, практическому здравоохранению реализовывать эти вопросы. Спасибо большое, Оксана. Я думаю, что те проблемные вопросы, которые вы высказали, они обязательно найдут свое решение в ближайшее время. Уважаемые коллеги, я следующее слово хотел бы предоставить доктору Virginie Supervie. Это наш научный сотрудник, представитель Института эпидемиологии Франции. У нас совместно с этим институтом имеется научный проект, который реализуется. И очень интересный доклад – это составление карты эпидемии ВИЧ для улучшения профилактики и ухода в связи с ВИЧ-инфекцией. Пожалуйста, Virginie.
Здравствуйте. Good morning, everybody. So first, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to present the work that we conducted in France. So I'm going to talk about the work that we conducted to understand more the HIV epidemics, to produce estimates and see how these estimates can help design HIV intervention. So as you all know, now we have a potent antiretroviral treatment. So it is important for people living with HIV to access this treatment early in the course of HIV infection for two reasons. For their own benefit, because people who are treated early, they can have a life expectancy that is similar to people who are not infected with HIV. And also people who are successfully treated, they don't transmit HIV anymore. So people should access treatment for their own benefit to reduce morbidity and mortality, but also for the community because it helps reducing HIV transmission at the population level. We also have old and new prevention tools. We have, needle syringe exchange program, and now we also have pre-exposure prophylaxis. These tools can help prevent HIV acquisition, and again, it's beneficial for the individual, but also for the community level, because if many people use this prevention tool, then it will help reduce HIV transmission. So in this context, it's important to know your epidemic, to design and set up cost-effective HIV prevention and testing strategies, and to improve HIV care. So in France, we use three main data sources to produce estimates for the HIV epidemics. To get an estimate of the number of people diagnosed with HIV and in care, we use health insurance data, and we also use cohort data, so data on patients who are followed up for HIV longitudinally. Then to estimate the number of people who are living with undiagnosed HIV, and also to estimate the number of new infections and the time from infection to diagnosis. We use data on newly diagnosed HIV cases, and we use a statistical model, which is called back calculation, which I'm going to talk a little bit more in the next slide. So that helps produce estimates. And then for the third group, for people who are diagnosed with HIV but not yet in care, we use, again, cohort data and our estimate of the number of people living with undiagnosed HIV. So I'm going to try to briefly explain how we produce estimate for the undiagnosed HIV infection. So we use surveillance data for this purpose, and we use what surveillance system can observe each year. We use the number of new HIV cases that are registered each year. This number of new HIV cases, they reflects two things that we would like to know and that are not observable. It reflects the number of new infections that occur each year, HIV incidence, and it also reflects the distribution of time from infection to diagnosis. So then the number of new HIV diagnoses contains some information on these two metrics that we want to know about to track the epidemics. So the back calculation method will help estimate these two metrics with data on this on the number of new HIV cases. And to do that, we have to provide some information on one of the metrics that we want to estimate. And we provide some information on the time from infection to diagnosis using data on the clinical status of people who are newly diagnosed with HIV. Because this clinical stage provide information on how long, on the time from infection to diagnosis. For example, people who are diagnosed with primary HIV infection, we know that they were infected recently. While people who are diagnosed with AIDS, we know that they have been infected a long time ago. So this is how the method works. And then once we have estimates of the incidence curve and on the time from infection to diagnosis, then we can get an estimate of the number of people who are living with undiagnosed HIV. So we use this method in France to have an estimate of the undiagnosed HIV population, and the two other data sources that I mentioned earlier to have an estimate of the whole number people who are living with HIV. So in 2016, we estimated that in France, 173,000 people were living with HIV. And in France, we are about 67 million people. So among adults, 3 out of 1,000 people are living with HIV. Among people living with HIV, 86% were diagnosed, 76% were treated, and 64% had a viral load undetectable. So if we compare this cascade of care with the UNAIDS target that was set for 2020, as you know, the 90-90-90, we should have 90% of people living with HIV diagnosed. Among people diagnosed, we should have 90% on treatment, and among people treated, we should have 90% with undetectable viral load. So in 2016, in France, we had 86% of people living with HIV diagnosed. Among people diagnosed, we had 88% treated, and among people treated, we had 97% with undetectable viral load. So we didn't reach independently the 390, but overall, we had 74% of people living with HIV with an undetectable viral load. And this is higher than the 390 together, because if you have 90-90-90, at the end you have 73% of people living with HIV that should have undetectable viral load. And in France, altogether we have 74. So we kind of reach indirectly this target, but nevertheless, we don't see a huge decrease in HIV transmission. And I will explain why later. Here, you have an estimate of the number of new HIV infections that occur each year in France from 2004 to 2016. This is the mean estimate, and around you have like some uncertainty about around the estimates. So in France, in 2016, we estimated that about 5,800 people were newly infected with HIV. So why don't we see a decrease in HIV transmission? Two reasons. The coverage of HIV prevention is not high enough. And second reason, the time from infection to access to treatment is too long. And why is it too long in France? It's because the time from infection to diagnosis is very long. And here, you have some estimates of this distribution of time in between the steps of the care continuum. Here, this is the time from infection to diagnosis. So in median, it takes 3.3 years for people, once infected, to get diagnosed. And this is the median value, so this means that for 50% of the people, it's above this value, and for 50% of the people, it's below this value. Then here you have the time from, the median time from diagnosis to entry in care in year. Then here you have the time from entry in care to access treatment, and here you have the time in year again from accessing treatment to reach virus suppression. So as you can see in France, once people are diagnosed, usually they go to the next step quite fast, a few months. But what is very long is the time from infection to diagnosis. So the challenge to improve HIV care in France is to reduce this time and to reduce the number of new infections. Reducing this time and reducing the number of new infections will reduce the number of people that will enter the HIV care cascade and will improve the first 90. So to reduce the time from infection to diagnosis, you have to know better who are the people who are living with undiagnosed HIV infection. And we use the method that I quickly presented early on to have some estimate about this population. So in France, in 2016, we estimated that around 24,000 people were living with undiagnosed HIV. Among these people, more than 70% were men. About 40% were men who had sex with men. About 40% were people heterosexual born abroad. And among people born abroad, the vast majority were people who were born in sub-Saharan Africa. We had about 15% who were heterosexual born in France, and less than 1% were people who were using drug. So these are the number. Then we use the size of each population to get some estimate of the rate. So here you have the number of undiagnosed HIV infection per 10,000 inhabitants or 10,000 people. So this means that if we test randomly in the population 10,000 people, in average, we will find 6 people living with undiagnosed HIV infection. And this is a little bit higher for men. It's about 9 per 10,000. Then if we can reach MSM, we will find more undiagnosed HIV infection. Because in this group, the number of undiagnosed infection is about, 3 to 5%. Then we have also high rate for heterosexual born in sub-Saharan Africa, about 1% here. And then we also have a pretty high percentage for also people who inject drugs born abroad, about 1%. So these were estimated at the national level, and what we tried to do also is to provide estimate at the sub-national level to understand where people living with undiagnosed HIV were living in France. And here you have estimates at the first level administrative division, which is similar to the oblast level. So in red, you can see the region where there is a lot of people living with undiagnosed HIV. And if you take these three regions here, so this is the Paris region, and this is, I mean, two regions of the south east of France, we have more than 50% of people living with undiagnosed HIV in these three regions. So if we intensify HIV intervention in this region, maybe we can have an impact, a bigger impact overall in France. So this is the distribution of the number, but what is also important to look at is at the rate, because maybe in some region there is a lot of cases because there is a lot of people living in the region. So here you can see the number of undiagnosed HIV infection per 10,000 inhabitants. And here we can see a complementary information, because we see that the region with the highest rates are overseas region. These are regions so overseas, and the rates here can be 10 times higher than the national rate. And we can still see that the Paris region has a high rate. So this was, I mean, estimate at the first level administrative division, and we try to go at a more granular level, because sometimes estimates at the regional level, so at the oblast level, can hide the fact that maybe in one region there is some geographic area that are more affected than others, and this is the case in France. And this is estimate then at the second level administrative division, which is like the rayon level. And doing that, we found that 75% of people living with undiagnosed HIV were living in 26 areas that are shown in gray here. And these are mainly areas that are very, I mean, with big cities. So what we can see, we can say in France is that the people who are living with undiagnosed HIV are mainly living in cities, so it's an urban epidemic. And also to show you why it's important to go at the granular level, this is the Paris region. And so this is Paris here, and around Paris you have 7 districts, 7 rayons. And so as I told you, in the Paris region we have around 10,000 people living with undiagnosed HIV infection. And this is the distribution. So in Paris, 36% of people who are living with undiagnosed HIV in the Paris region live in Paris. And if you take Paris and these two districts, the two northern districts, you have more than 60% of people living with undiagnosed HIV. So again, if you intensify the intervention in this district, you can have maybe a better impact. And if you look also at the population that are affected in one district compared to the other, you can see that they can be very different. Here in Paris, among people who are living with undiagnosed HIV infection, close to 50% are men who have sex with men, and about 40% are born abroad heterosexual. While in the district next to Paris, less than 20%, I mean 14% of people living with undiagnosed HIV are men who have sex with men, while more than 60% are born abroad heterosexual. So you can see that from one district to another, which are quite, I mean, close to each other, I mean, populations that are affected by HIV can differ. So it's important to know that, so you can tailor the HIV intervention from one region to another to better reach who are the people who are affected by HIV. So to quickly conclude and summarize what I told you, in France, like in many countries, time interval between HIV infection and diagnosis remains too long, and as a consequence, there is late ART initiation. And so one of the big challenge is to reduce this time from infection to diagnosis for the individual, but also to reduce HIV transmission. We saw that all areas are affected by HIV, but some geographic areas are more affected than others. And it's important to know that, to intensify in this region HIV prevention and testing intervention. And we also saw that in France, the epidemic is quite, urban, so it's important for the cities to engage into the fight against HIV. We saw that all population are affected by HIV, but some groups are more affected than others. So it's important to adapt HIV prevention and testing program in each region according to who are the population affected by HIV. And I believe that providing numbers on the HIV epidemic at national and subnational level is important to be efficient and cost effective. And it is the start of the solution to end HIV transmission. And I would like also to quickly mention the fact that we're starting a project with our Kazakh colleagues. And I'm very glad about this project. We're starting this project with the team of Dr. Bazenkin, and the overall goal of the project is to produce similar number for Kazakhstan. So I hope next time we will be able to show you this number for Kazakhstan. Thank you. Спасибо.
Thank you very, very much, Virginie. I think you've helped us really dive into the substance of this seminar, since your talk was really about how science can inform and optimize programs, and the sort of granular analysis of the epidemics, both from a quantitative and a qualitative perspective that you conducted in France, guiding now testing and treatment programs is truly, I think, remarkable information for all of us here. And I'm so pleased that a program of that type is now starting here in Kazakhstan. It will be a premiere for the region, and very much an example of what we would now like collectively to achieve across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Thank you also for the discussion of the last 90, as I'm now thinking about Sasha Golutov's talk, as much as we all respect the 390s, at the end, the one that counts is the last 90 if we want to impact the epidemic. Sometimes we're sort of pleased that we've made that little progress on the first or the second, but the one we have to keep and monitor, the one we want to reach is the last 90, as also discussed by Virginie.